years ago when I actually took a trip up to Keddie Resort myself, and I met up with Josh and Sheila Sharp, who is the only sister that is surviving this. But you know what, Josh, I'm going to let you tell the story, and where would you like to start with this?
Yeah, I'm guessing that your audience is probably not too familiar with the story, so I'll just start at the beginning.
Sure.
Like you said, this took place a long time ago in 1981, and it took place in a town called Keddie, which really, it wasn't really a town. Picture more like a trailer park, but with cabins. And the nearest major town is a town called Quincy. And then I think the nearest bigger town than that is Reno. So that gives you kind of an idea as to where this is. It's in the, just nestled in the hills of Northern California, a really remote, isolated community. And a family of three was killed, and then the friend of one of the boys in the family was also killed. And just a horrific, unsolved crime. I can, there's a photo on your screen of the family right there.
Can you name those? I can't remember all their names. I have
Sure.
three of them. Who are the other two? There's Rick. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, right in the middle there is Sue Sharp, the mother, and she was one of the victims. And then on Sue's left is the dark-haired girl there. That's Sheila, and Sheila is Sue's daughter, and Sheila was spending the night next door at a sleepover, and so she was not injured, but she actually discovered the bodies the next morning. Let's see, to Sue's right is John, and that's her son, and he was murdered that night along with his friend Dana. And then on the bottom right corner there, that's Tina, and she probably adds the biggest mystery to this case. She was 12 years old at the time. The morning that the bodies were discovered, Tina was nowhere to be found, and they did not find her until years later when her skull and some of her other bones were discovered about 60 miles from Keddie in a really remote, another remote isolated area called Feather Falls. And so that just adds to the mystery, not only the brutality of these people were killed, but then Tina's disappearance, and which we can only assume was a kidnapping of some sort. Mm-hmm. And no one knows exactly how she died or when she died.
So, do you want to tell a little bit about the story, what was going on, why the family was in Keddie?
Sure. They were a very tight-knit family, and they had moved around a lot as the kids were growing up. And it was just Sue raising these 5 children on her own. And from all the relatives we interviewed, doing the best job that she could at that. And they finally had settled in Keddie. They could live there. The rent wasn't very expensive. Sue was able to work at various jobs that were close by. And it was a really idyllic community. No one locked their doors at night. Everyone knew each other. So, you pick the last place on earth that you would imagine something like this would happen, and Keddie would be it. So, for the most part, for the Sharp family, life seemed pretty good in Keddie until that terrible night. And like I said, Sheila was sleeping next door. And then there were also 2 other boys sleeping in a side bedroom, and they were both also Sharp family members, Sheila's younger brothers, Rick and Greg, and they were untouched. They were not hurt that night. And also in that room was another family friend named Justin, and he also survived that night, though has since gone on record to talk about the things that he might have witnessed that night. And most people believe, and Justin himself says
I was watching your second CD of the documentary, and I learned a lot of information I did not know before. So they did hypnotize Justin.
Yes, that's right. The police were really baffled by this crime. I mean, they had never had anything like this happen in Plymouth County before. They were not prepared for it, and this is by their own admission. They were not prepared for it. They brought in a lot of people to help. Some claim that maybe they brought in too many people, and there were too many investigators poking around, and that might have messed up the investigation to a certain degree. But they were pretty sure that Justin, the murders would have caused a lot of noise. There was blood, all over the cabin, and even knife marks in the walls. It was a very violent scene, and so the police were convinced that the boys must have woken up and perhaps had seen something. And so Justin was put under hypnosis on several occasions and would go to great lengths describing the things that he witnessed, but he would describe them as if he were having a dream. And so like a dream, the imagery was a bit muddled and confusing, and he wasn't always clear. But at the same time, he did describe things that there's really no explanation as to how he could know these things unless he had seen something. So from his hypnosis, the police were able to put together a sketch of these two men that Justin claimed to have seen in the cabin that night. And those sketches were distributed, throughout the county, Sacramento, San Francisco, as far as San Jose. And there are a lot of people in Plymouth County today who, when they're shown those sketches, they claim that, they knew who these two guys were. So, to add to the mystery is why it was never solved.
Right. So
you can see the two sketches right there.
Right. Well, also, I've heard several different stories that it was possible that the boys, they had been hitchhiking that night, and the boys came in and walked in on something that possibly maybe the daughter was little Tina was being raped, or the mother was being raped, or they were already in the house when these two fellas came in, supposedly two fellas came in, and like you said, woke up to what was happening and got involved in this.
Right.
What did the police say about this?
Well, the police never, for the part two to our documentary, the Plymouth County Sheriff's Office were heavily involved. They had given my producer and I, Amanda, full access to the case files, and they were heavily involved. But they never, the main investigators who were involved in our films would never really come out one way or the other and say what their theories were. But most people believe that the boys probably walked in on something. They were fully dressed, and they were dressed for cold weather, whereas the mother was dressed really in sleepwear, a nightgown, basically. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people think that, they walked in on something happening to Sue, the mother. And if you look carefully at the crime scene photos, you'll see that a lot of attention was paid towards Sue in terms of hurting her and tying her up. She was tied really thoroughly and violently, whereas if you look carefully, the boys, Johnny's hands are tied, but their bodies, their legs look like they're tied together, but they really weren't. There's just some string or electrical cord there, but it's not really tied very tightly around either of their legs. So again, it really seemed like this was an attack that focused on Sue. And in one of the photos that you might see, she was also covered up with a blanket.
Right.
Which, as probably means that the killer or killers knew her and didn't want to face the horror of what they had done. And then Justin's description is parallel with that Dana and Johnny walked in on something, saw Sue getting attacked, and then attempted to intervene.
Oh, so Justin said that in his hypnosis?
Well, he didn't. Again, he was only 12 at the time, but the way that he described what he saw, for example, he described Dana, who was Johnny's friend. Dana was 17 years old, getting in a fight with these two men, and then turning to run out the kitchen, and then getting struck in the back of the head with a hammer. And we've blurred out the photos, but a lot of what Justin said was consistent with their injuries. So, and then of course there's what was Tina doing when all this was going on? We know that she was in the house. The boys in the side bedroom would later say that she was inside the house at the time, and in one of Justin's memories, he described Tina walking out carrying a blanket and asking what all the noise was about or what was going on. And so I think that at that point, the two killers, in a panic, they had killed everyone except for the boys in the side bedroom. And then I think Tina walked out and in a panic just grabbed her and left. And then who knows, where they went from there. But that's just my opinion.
The crimes were horrific, and the police department up there had never seen anything like that. Can you describe the crime scene?
Mm-hmm. You can see pictures of it there. One of the photos that just came up was actually of two of the murder weapons. One of the more bizarre aspects of the crime scene is that at least three of the murder weapons were left behind at the scene. And so you just saw a black and white photo of a hammer and a butcher knife. And those were left on a table side by side, almost strategically placed there. I mean, it almost seemed like someone had purposely put them there and aligned them just so. And then another weapon that was on the floor next to Johnny was a small steak knife that is actually, there might be a picture of it, but was actually bent on itself due to, we can only assume, due to the force of the blows. And so, like for example, the photo that's up right now on the screen, Sue's body was next to the couch on the floor, and she was covered in that blanket. Dana's next to her, and his half of his face was resting on a couch cushion in a very unusual position. I don't think he fell that way. I think someone put him on the couch cushion in that way. And then Johnny's next to him on his back with his hands tied and folded in front of him on his chest.
Now they say the murder weapons and the cording came from the house.
Yes, as far as we know, everything came from the house. So the steak knife, the butcher knife, the hammer came from the house, and these things were all identified by Sheila and by other family members as coming from the Sharp house. So a lot of people think that well, this wasn't a planned murder. Maybe the two killers went there to discuss something with Sue, and then things got hand, obviously, from that point on. And in our documentaries, there's we offer a lot of theories as to what exactly could have been happening in Cabin.
But the murderers concentrated on the face, didn't they, of each victim? They were. I mean, it was just an awful
abdomen, on the head several times, and he actually died. Someone strangled him.
So I mean,
that was actually what caused his death.
So then he probably didn't die right away from his wounds, and that's what they did, huh?
Yeah, could very well be. And then Sue suffered just incredible wounds all over her body, but mainly to her face, her neck, her hands, her arms. One of the photos shows that the soles of her feet are stained with blood, so there's the suggestion that she might have been walking around at some point in the crime scene. We just don't know.
Wow.
But one of the things that we really believe about the crime scene is that in addition to the blanket being placed over Sue, we really think that a lot of this scene was staged to a certain degree. I believe that the way that the bodies are positioned, I just don't think that they would fall down onto the carpet in these positions. And so there's just a lot of possibilities to that. Some people think that, well, one of the killers dealt with Tina and maybe put her in a car and drove off somewhere. The other one came back to either make sure that the family was dead or to arrange the crime scene in a certain way, maybe to get the police to believe something else had happened there that night. You know, when these murders first were discovered, a lot of people thought there was some sort of cult involved or something to that degree, just because of all the blood and the knife marks on the walls and things like that. So,
why do you think?
Just a really bizarre, unusual crime scene.
Why do you think that they would have staged this?
Well, my only thought is that I think the two killers knew that the police would look to them for a lot of reasons, and so they might have tried to deflect attention away from themselves by making the crime look like something else. But again, this is just speculation on my part. I can't really say for sure.
Did you have long conversations with the authorities up in that area about the case?
Yes and no. In the first documentary, we did get the involvement of the sheriff who'd investigated Irons at the time. Of course, he's long since retired, and a few other law enforcement agents who investigated the case, but they were willing to kind of summarize and generalize, but not to delve too deeply into specifics, which is understandable because it's still an unsolved case. It was really with the sequel to the documentary, though, that we were able to uncover a lot more, because Plymouth County at the time had a new sheriff. At the time of part 2, had a new sheriff, and he was actually friends with John and Dana when they were teenagers, and now he's sheriff of this town. So he had a vested interest in seeing these murders solved, and he gave us access to pretty much everything that we wanted. And so we spent a long time talking to him about the murders, but again, because it was an unsolved case, the police there just never really wanted to delve too deeply into their own personal theories as to what might have happened. But we spent a long time with them, and at least for a while, they were very supportive of what we were doing.
Now, did John Douglas, he was an FBI agent, did he do a profile on the killers?
He did. He wasn't terribly involved. The Plymouth County got the FBI involved, and the Department of Justice in Sacramento was involved because of Tina's disappearance and kidnapping. So he did a profile, and the profile really centered on the two killers being drawn toward Tina for various purposes. And perhaps that's true. It's not what I necessarily think happened, but just because I don't think if they wanted Tina for some reason that they would have needed to. It would have been very easy to abduct Tina at any time from Keddie. I don't think that would have been hard for them to do. So I don't think they went there that night
why didn't they just leave Tina there? Now what's really strange is that there was 3 boys in that back bedroom. I don't understand why they didn't harm those 3 boys. And either the boys heard what was going on in the living room, or the murderers walked around to see if anybody else might have been in the house, saw the 3 boys, but they didn't touch them. Now isn't that strange? But yet they took Tina.
Right, it's very strange. Some people think that one of the murderers was the stepfather of Justin, one of the boys in the side bedroom, which would then explain perhaps why Justin wasn't hurt, because it was his own stepfather committing the crimes. So there's that possibility.
Is that Marty? Is that Marty?
Yeah, right. His name, Justin's stepfather's name was Marty, and he's dead. So nothing can be done about that. But it's a very popular theory that Marty and his friend Bo committed these murders. And on our website, with KeddieMurdersFilm.com, you can really read all about the various theories, not only about Marty and Bo, but lots of other possibilities too. Another one that our documentary explores is that Tina might have been pregnant, and that might have been she might have been pregnant by Marty, and that was why he went there that night, and that's why Tina was abducted. And these theories don't just come to us and we spout them off. I mean, these are supported by the case files. So I've always found it interesting that they left everything behind. The bodies, the murder weapons, fingerprints in a dumpster behind the cabin. There was bloody tissue and a bloody Swiss Army knife, which might not be connected, but they might be connected. They left all these things behind, but they took one thing, and that was Tina. And so I think it's an important question. Why leave all of this behind and yet take only this one thing?
No, yeah.
That's a question that, as we were making the movies, really we tried to answer as best we could.
Did Marty fit the description of one of those sketches?
Yes, I think so. A lot of us people in Plymouth County think so. Some people say, well, if you take the half of one guy's face and mix that with the lower half of the other face, then that looks like Marty. I've never really gone through the trouble to do that. But Marty, I can see the sketches now. He looks like the mustached man, in my opinion. He often wore sunglasses, as you can see in the sketch as well. And now that Justin is a grown man, he's continued to go under hypnosis, and has now come out and fully said that this is what I witnessed. I witnessed my stepfather Marty committing these murders. I witnessed Bo standing over Dana and hitting him with a hammer. So hopefully, as time goes on, Justin might come forward more with what he remembers. And I'm also hoping that Rick Sharp will come forward with what he might remember. Rick has never, though he was supportive of the 2 documentaries, he never got involved. Though he would often say that there's a good chance he saw something in the cabin that night. It's my hope that when he feels ready, he might try to explore what he remembers.
So did they attempt to hypnotize him as well?
They attempted to interview him, and I have that tape. The only problem is after about 5 seconds, the tape mysteriously cuts off, and there was never a transcript of the interview, so that interview is lost. And as far as I know, Rick doesn't remember even being interviewed. And then they tried interviewing Greg as well. Greg was only 5 years old, 5 or 6 years old, and he was just too little to be interviewed, and it didn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever? Did they ever bring any psychics into this case?
They did briefly, and then they were contacted by a lot of psychics, just voluntarily, and nothing really ever went anywhere. The police took those claims seriously, and they followed up on any information that anyone would give them, including psychics, but it never really went anywhere, and that's why we included some psychics in the beginning of our second documentary. We're attempting to sort of parallel the steps that police went through to solve the crime. And so if you see our documentary, you'll see some psychics in the beginning and then that.
Right, and I noticed that there were 3, but not one of them said the same thing. They all had a different story.
Right. So I don't think, as much as I would think that might lead, that a psychic might lead us to the solving of this crime, I don't think that will happen. I think it's going to come down to shows like this, getting the word out to the right people, because we do believe that there are people out there who know exactly what happened and who did this. But
Josh,
hope they'll come forward one day.
Okay, now, what about the confession that Marty made to that counselor?
Mm-hmm. Right. Shortly after the murders, Marty had a lot of troubles in life, troubles with alcohol and drugs, and he was seeing a therapist in Reno, and he'd gone to this therapist about 5 or 6 times, and the therapist explained that he felt that with each appointment they were building towards something, but the therapist didn't know what. And so finally on his last appointment, Marty went to the therapist and said, well, I have something to tell you, and then after I tell you this, I'm moving away to travel with a carnival, and you're never going to see me again anyway. And then he proceeded to describe the Keddie murders. He explained that he killed Sue. He said that Tina had to be incapacitated, and that eventually he killed her because she was a witness and would be able to identify them. He did not admit to killing the 2 boys, John and Dana. He also did not say that his friend Bo killed the 2 boys. He didn't bring Bo into the confession at all. But he described the location, he described the weapons, he described Sue and Tina. He gave a motive for killing them, and the motive was that Marty was married at the time to a woman named Marilyn, and they lived in Keddie also. And Marilyn and Marty's marriage was not a good one, and you can see Marilyn in part 1 of the documentary. And Marty felt that Sue was butting in and trying to keep Marilyn from Marty. And so Marty said, well, I went to the cabin that night. I was upset at Sue. He was trying to destroy my relationship with my wife. And then, like I said, if that's true, I think things just spiraled out of control from there. So Marty did confess, and confess with details and with motive. But then that confession was never followed up on in any way by the sheriff's office. In fact, we didn't even know of the until my producer and I, Amanda, happened to discover the documents when we were doing our research one day. We just in a couple of days we were able to track down the therapist, and what I always found strange about that is that the sheriff's office in Plymouth County told us that they could never find the therapist, and that was why they never followed up. Well, we found him in 2 days, and this was 20 years later. So I just don't know if I believe that they couldn't track this guy down. So it's just yet another bizarre thing about the case. You really get the feeling after a while that you spend enough time with this case, you get the feeling that there are people out there who don't want it solved.
Yeah, and why do you think that is?
I think it would open up a huge can of worms, and even to this day in Plymouth County, one, it just shed light on their inability to solve it originally. I don't think we can on that. But then I also think there were a lot of things going on within the Plymouth County Sheriff's Office that they wouldn't want the public to know. And I think Marty might have been connected to some of that.
Oh,
and so, were Marty to go down for this crime, he might have blown the lid on things that he knew.
Well, the thing is, the murder weapons were left in the cabin. Surely there was fingerprints.
Yeah, that's always been, according to the sheriff's office, they were not able to match any fingerprints to anyone that they knew. I have sources who have told me that Marty's fingerprint was found in the cabin in blood on a glass. But I've only had my sources tell me that, and I've never been able to confirm that with someone in an authoritative position at the sheriff's office in Plymouth County. But I have reason to believe my sources. So again, it seemed like there was at least some evidence pointing toward Marty. I mean, I could give you even more, but he was never really looked at. He was interviewed once, and his interview, which you can hear a lot of in the second documentary, with a lot of knowledge. If you listen carefully to the things that he says, the way that he says them, I think reveals a lot about what happened that night. But again, the police never followed through. They supposedly followed him a little bit after the murders happened just to see what he was doing, but nothing ever came of that.
Well, everything was in that cabin for the murders, but what about that white tape? That white medical tape that was used. They said there was rolls and rolls of it used.
I don't know about that. Yeah, I think it came from a toolbox that I think Sheila later identified as coming from the house. There was also some medical tape or a medical tape dispenser found buried near where Tina's remains were found. But again, yeah, I think everything came from that house. They found evidence that electrical cords and phone cords had been cut throughout the house to tie up the victims, and that's the picture there is Sue's feet and ankles, and you can tell that they really, like I said, the attention was really paid toward her. I don't know too much about the medical tape that was found. In terms of hard evidence, tangible, concrete evidence, we were never able to look at any of that. Just case files and photographs. But a lot of people who claim to know say that the evidence is gone anyway.
Now, Josh,
there's only maybe a few bits and pieces left at this point.
Now, what about those two mysterious notes that were left in the cabin?
Handwriting samples.
Did they take any handwriting samples off of those?
Yeah. These notes that you're looking at, they weren't left in the cabin. These were letters. For example, the one you're looking at right now. These are letters that Marty wrote to Marilyn after the murders, in which he's begging her to get back together with him.
I thought they were left in the cabin.
Are really interesting. One of them says, something along the lines of, I've sacrificed, 4 lives for this, so please come back to me. And you can see the one there, please forgive me. So again, he could have just been a lovesick guy and wanted his wife to come back to him. It just depends on how you read into some of the things that he says.
Now, what about Sheila and Rick?
Yeah.
Are they interested in still getting this solved?
Well, Sheila was actively involved in both documentaries. Without her, we never would have come this far. In more recent years, I think Murders a little bit. So I know she's just involved in a lot of other things going on in her life. So I don't know. I mean, of course, I think she wants to see this solved. The hard part is that we have a really active forum on our website. But there are people on our website who have now done far more work on this case than I ever have. And that's not always going to sit well with everyone. A lot gets discussed on the website, and I think if we really want to solve this crime, then things need to be exposed, warts and all. And that can be really difficult. I completely understand why she might not want certain things talked about. And so I think for that reason, she's kind of taken a step back, and I understand that. At the same time, I feel I have a job to do to pursue this case as open, honestly, as I can.
The people that are on your forums, are they up in that area from Keddie?
A few are. I don't think so much from Keddie. Not too many people live in Keddie anymore, though the property was recently bought a couple of years ago, and those guys are attempting to restore it to its former glory. It hasn't happened yet. I hope that it will. So not so much in Keddie, but definitely in Quincy and in some of the neighboring towns and in Plymouth County. We definitely have some members who are from there. But then the rest of our forums, pretty much scattered throughout the world. It's really drawn an eclectic group of people who are wholly committed to this story. It's pretty incredible what they've done, sacrifices that they've made, to get the word out there.
But the thing is, if they have a confession by Marty, and Bo is his friend who is supposed to be involved in that, why don't they just go after those two? I know Marty's passed on, but why don't they just concentrate on those two?
I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that. We were working in conjunction with the sheriff's office all the way through part 2, all the way to the end of part 2. We had finished filming, and we wanted to release part 2 on Halloween. We had October 31st as our release date, and that's when things fell apart between us and the sheriff's office. They felt that we were releasing the movie too soon, and they were under the assumption that they were going to be able to direct when this documentary was going to be available to the public, and we had never made that sort of agreement with them. So when they discovered that we were going to put this movie out on our time frame and not theirs, that's when things kind of fell apart between us, and the relationship kind of crumbled from there. But there are members of our forums who have made some connections with current law enforcement agents in Plymouth County, and they're talking. I personally have not spoken to anyone at the sheriff's office for a couple years now.
Now, Gary was the original owner, and he's the one that had the cabin torn down. Do you think he was pressured to have that cabin torn down by the residents that were still living in Keddie?
Yes, definitely. And I think the first documentary might have had a little bit to do with that, because as soon as we started poking around, he didn't like that. Though once Sheila came on board, Gary was much more supportive. But yeah, I think the first documentary just drew too much attention to this cabin that I think a lot of people had ignored for a while. And so right toward the tail end of filming the first one, the cabin was torn down. I know a lot of people make a big deal of that. I don't know how much could have really been learned from the cabin at that point. At least one other family had lived there since the murders happened.
They lived in that cabin after the murders?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, at least one family did. And the walls and the flooring was different. So I just don't know what police could have really gotten
Now, supposedly that whole area is haunted. And who's this Ashley Conti, who said they would hear screams coming from there at night?
Yeah, I never met Ashley, but you can see there. This is an article written by Kevin Fagan for the San Francisco Chronicle. This was written pretty early on while we were filming part one, and we met with Kevin a couple times. He's a great guy, great writer for the SF Chronicle, and for the most part, his article focused on that people, like younger people, who would go down to Keddie kind of as a dare, like something you would do on Friday the 13th or on Halloween.
House.
You would try to spook your friends by seeing who could go to the cabin and who could touch the door or look through the window or something like that. So I know that Ashley said that she saw, I think, a floating chair at one point, and it's written in blood on the wall. We never really experienced anything like that. I mean, before the cabin had been torn down, I had been in there several times with Sheila sometimes. We never really experienced anything like that. So I wonder how much of that is real, or how much of that just demonstrates that the Keddie Murders became almost like an urban legend in Plymouth County, where the facts had become so distorted over the years that people had forgotten that, this really happened to real people.
Well, Annette Martin had taken a trip up there, who's was a well-known psychic. She passed away a couple of years ago from San Jose. I don't know if you know who she is. And she
I do.
And she went up there, and she said it was extremely haunted. And she said that that land needed to have an exorcism done on it, and it was possible that whatever was there, they won't be able to get rid of.
Right. Yeah, I did read. So who knows? The owners, the new owners, it's their intention to build that community back up, and also to build a park that they would dedicate to the victims. But like I said, I don't live there, so I don't know exactly what the status of the rebuilding of Keddie is. It's a huge undertaking, and so hopefully that will happen one day. I think the victims deserve something like that, and maybe that's something that will bring that area some peace. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
So when I was up there, when I met you and Sheila, is it still the same owners?
Let's see. Yes, at the time that we met, it was the new owners were there. I don't know if they were on the property when we were there.
They were.
But they were generally okay with what we were doing. When they learned that we were making a sequel, they asked us if we could take the word murders out of the title. So I think they were what they're trying to do is to separate Keddie from the new Keddie from what happened in 1981. But I don't think they'll ever be able to do that.
Right.
Which is why I think a memorial park or a garden or something like that would be rather than just trying to pretend that this didn't happen.
But they had talked about that, 4 years ago? 3 years ago about doing that?
It's been a while. But again, maybe they're ready to reopen. I don't know.
Have you been up there since then? Since the last time?
No, I haven't. I have not been up there for a while. It's been a couple years now. Some people, there is the possibility that we might look into a part 3, which would obviously get me up there a lot more often, but right now I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. We don't want to do a part 3 just to do it. We want to make sure that there's enough new information out there, and I'm just not sure if there is, and I'm not sure if we would have access to it again.
Now, remember when you took me to cabin 26? That's where Marty lived, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that place was falling apart. What happened to that cabin?
Do you mean what happened when when we were there?
Well, no, I know when we went there, you told me to go over to cabin 26 because that's where Marty had lived.
Yeah.
And so I went in there. The place was a disaster, but I went in there and I brought a K2 with me. And you filmed that as well. And when I went into this cabin, we weren't sure if Marty had passed on or not at that time. And so I started asking questions to Marty. I said, Marty, will you communicate with me? And the lights were going up on that. I remember I showed you, Josh, the lights were going up red on that K2. And then I asked him, I don't know how many questions, and Josh has that video. I'd like to get that from you. And then I also asked Marty, I said, Marty, are you sorry for what you did? And the K2 went all the way up into the red. Yeah, it was amazing. Remember, I called you and I said, Josh, he's communicating with me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can see some of the comments on your audience watching, and for people who are interested in that side of the story, it would probably be a very, very active place to visit. We never really had a problem getting on the property once we had sort of established who we were. But I don't know what it's like today. I would definitely caution anyone from just walking into Keddie and wandering around. I would definitely encourage people not to do that. And try to somehow make a contact with someone who lives there or who lives in Quincy who can kind of walk you down into the property, but I definitely would recommend that people just go wandering around there on their own.
Now, Josh, what about that bloody shirt, the bloody sweatshirt they found by the river?
Just never led anywhere. There was really no evidence that this was linked to the murders. I think the report says that it might have been weighed down with rocks or something like that, but it just never went anywhere. There are endless pages of reports about things like that just never went anywhere. And again, I think part of the problem is that too many people were working on the case at one time, and so reports were getting mixed up and signals were getting crossed, and then no one would communicate with each other.
Oh my God.
It really sounded like it was a really big mess to me.
It does sound like a big mess.
Yeah. So, and we've made attempts to get people involved. We in fact arranged all the original DNA technicians who worked the case. We tracked them all down, and they were living in all different parts of the country, and they all agreed that they would meet up in Plumas County to look at this case again. And that's just another example of we would put these things, Sheila and I and Amanda, we would put these things in the sheriff's office lap and say, okay, now you have the power and the authority to take this and run with it. And they just never did.
But the thing about this bloody sweatshirt, wasn't the skull found in that area as well? No. The Tina's skull and bones were found almost 60 miles away. Oh, from
Keddie in an area called Feather Falls, and this was kind of a really desolate area, a place where there were a lot of hobo camps, and people living in tents and things like that. And so, and her remains were discovered by chance, by a bottle collector, a man who was out there collecting bottles and stumbled across her skull. So, had that not happened, I don't think she ever would have been found. How she got there, who put her there, and how, that's I think, unfortunately, might remain a mystery forever.
And what about the footprints?
The shoebox.
Oh,
Did they ever find the shoebox?
Well, okay, talk about the shoebox or the toolbox that they were are you talking about the toolbox?
Shoebox. I think it was the little girl's shoebox. Did they ever find it?
Yeah, that's an interesting part of the story that's never fully been explained to us, except that they Sheila through the cabin a short time later and asked her to identify everything, and also asked her to identify if anything was missing. And the only thing that she could recall being missing was a shoebox that Tina had made in school, or that she had decorated in school. And so the common belief is that when she was taken, she took that shoebox with her.
Now, isn't that weird? Why would she take a blanket and a box with her? But
because it was someone she knew.
Because it was someone she knew?
That's what I
think. Yeah, could be. These were, things to
But the thing about it is, she had to have seen what happened to her mother and Dana and Johnny, and she had to have walked. I think they said they walked out the back door.
That's what I think Justin recalled in one of his hypnosis sessions.
Unless they kept her out of the front room and somebody kept her in the back room while this was going on. So maybe she didn't know this happened.
Right. There's just so many possibilities. So many possibilities. But I think the idea of her wandering out near the tail of this, I always picture it as the killers just in a panic ran out with her. There is the possibility of a third perpetrator who was waiting in a car outside, and maybe he was able to help them get her into this car. And when you watch part 2, you depending on your belief, you might see this third perpetrator. We just don't know.
That's interesting. A third one? Oh my God! Can I just ask you one question? Did Sheila remarry again? From the when I was there, I met that one fella that she was married to. Did she?
Oh, yeah.
She remarried again?
Yeah, I don't know all the particulars, but yeah, she's married to. She's happily married to her husband.
The third one. Is this the third one? Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I think he helped her write the new book that she put out. So,
she wrote a book? I didn't know she wrote a book.
Well, I haven't read it myself, so I can't speak to it. But it's like a self-help book. It's more about Sheila's life than the murders themselves. Oh. But I know that she does touch briefly upon the murders. So it's definitely worth checking out. But it's not really about the Keddie Murders.
Oh, okay. Josh, do you want to give people your website and how they can get your CD?
Sure. Our website is KeddieMurdersFilm.com. We've had that website for years now. It's a really popular place. You can read so much more about these murders and look at photographs and evidence and case files that members of our forum have put together. It's really incredible. And if you're interested in checking out the 2 documentaries, when you go on the page, you'll see the link on how to order those. But most of all, we encourage people, whether or not you watch those films or not, or visit the website, if this story interests you and you've got other friends who are interested in true crime and stories like this, our objective is just to spread the word in hopes that it reaches the right people.
Wow.
Because I think we're all drawn to this story because we're interested in the darker things in life. I was certainly drawn to it for that reason, but we just can't forget that these are real people who suffered a terrible tragedy. And so whatever we can do to get the word out there about their story in hopes that one day these murders can be solved. So I just really thank everyone for listening, and they'll go online and learn more about it if they're interested.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Fascinating
thank you,
with the story.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. It's a fascinating story. I saw part 2, and Tim has part 1, so I'm going to watch part 1 tonight.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you watched them in the reverse order, but that's okay.
Oh,
Maybe you'll discover something I missed in doing that. Who knows?
Number 2 was awesome. I totally
thank
enjoyed
you.
that. Very nicely done. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being our guest, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Yeah, you too, and thanks to your audience as well. Thanks, Noreen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good
All
night.
right, bye-bye.
Cool. Good show.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah?
I didn't get to say one word.
I know. Someone like you.
I know. I'm just kind of hanging out.
Just quiet over there, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we're going to be doing an ITC session after the show. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you for the chat room. You guys, I didn't see the chat, but nobody asked questions. You're pretty quiet tonight.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Thank you all for being there. Thanks for the moderators. And Tim and I are going to do an ITC session after this. And
We're going to do some Keddie Resort stuff.
yeah, we're going to try and contact the spirits over there. And Tim won't be quiet then. So don't forget to please subscribe, and please give a like to the show. I'd really appreciate it. And let's see, Tim and we're taking next week off, Easter vacation.
I'll be streaming stuff all throughout the week.
Yeah, Tim will.
Yeah.
But I have a break, and we'll be back.
Check out, you guys can, during the break, you guys can check out the new video, The Real Demon Attack, caught on tape. It's on the right of the player, so yeah, check it out and stuff. So, alright, you guys.
Okay,
we'll
so
see you in about 3 minutes.
Yeah, and the next show will be on Saturday, April 6th, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so good night. Well, I'll see you in about, 20 minutes or so?
8, 10.
8-10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks everybody. Good night. Thank
All right,
you.
guys.
Night.
Great.
Thanks.